You're listening to Tune Dig, a podcast for music lovers. The premise is simple. We dig into an album to discover what makes it interesting, and then we dig into the crates for a vinyl copy to give away to one lucky winner.
Go to tunedig.com for your chance to win, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter for more info about the album that didn't make the episode.
Today we're talking about
Metamodern Sounds and country music.
I asked you when we were kind of going back and forth about this record earlier this week, like, do you think there's anything that I've missed in our preparations? And you said, I think thinking there's a big idea to miss would be missing the big idea. And you were kind of joking, but that's a perfect way to describe Sturgill and the phenomenon around Sturgill, especially with this record. There are a lot of heavy, interesting topics covered on this record. And one of them that comes up in some of the reviews and things around this record is this idea of infinite regress. Like, at some point when you try to explain a thing, you use another fact to explain it. And then at some point you just reach the asymptote and you're like, well, it just kind of is. Right. So at some point, all knowledge kind of gets to the end of its rope.
One thing we do when we prepare for these episodes is make sure and listen to other podcasts that try to touch on the same topic to make real sure that we're not repeating the same thing that someone else already did for an hour and a half. I listened to several that are supposed to be covering this or doing an interview with someone about this record. 100% of them started by explaining what Turtles All the Way Down means. Instead of trying to explain it in this context to try to help you understand what he's saying, I think it's more important to get that if you don't know what he's saying, you don't get what he's saying, and he's okay with that. Right. He does a really great job somehow of creating concentric circles of the same topic on this record. On top of that metaphysical topic that he's more than happy to cover, this record is also specifically full of drug references. And in both of those cases, it's one of those where if you don't already have some of the background knowledge, and if you don't already honestly have a drive to know what the references are that he's making, you're just going to miss them. And I think he's okay with that. There was even one place in an interview where he was asked, like, from a lyrical standpoint, was there ever a point where you thought maybe some of the spiritual and metaphysical things you're talking about in this Americana record might go over people's heads? And he said, the people that know what I'm talking about, they know what I'm talking about. And the people that have to ask will probably never know. He is perfectly fine with the fact that you don't get an entire thread of references with this, but if you happen to be one of the lucky people who is both interested in metaphysical science and also drug culture, you've got a lot to unpack here.
He did, and he said as much. He did make a deliberate decision to say, I wanted to make a social consciousness record about love, just disguised as a country record. He has a long and interesting path getting to this point. A lot of things had to happen in his life for these ideas to converge into these songs. It's a sublime moment, and it kind of took the world by storm to go from doing open mic nights in Nashville bars to signing to Atlantic Records in like 365 days is kind of unbelievable.
I've seen Jesus play with flames in a lake of fire that I was standing in. Met the devil in Seattle, spent 9 months inside the lion's den. Met Buddha yet another time. He showed me a glowing light.
There are a lot of apparent contradictions here, which I think is part of what he's perfectly fine putting forward, because more or less that seems to be what he discovered, is that everything's full of apparent contradictions. That's what the Turtles All the Way Down thing is about. But it's important to note that he made a record filled with drug references at what he refers to as the most sober point in his entire life. But not only had he gotten sober, but he had just found out that his wife was pregnant. It's worth seeing that trajectory play itself out so that you can get here and be surprised by who is making this record at this particular point.
The apparent contradictions thing is a great way to put it. That's kind of one of the basic tenets of mindfulness, right? Is all of these things exist, light and dark, good and bad. They're not forces you can control necessarily. You just need to bring them all into harmony. It's weird to be talking about a country music record and to be discussing this kind of thing, but...
And that's the big idea.
That's the big idea, man. So he's at an interesting crossroads that you mentioned. He's like, I kind of got to get it together. This path of realizing he's going to be a father and he's got to grow up some. He starts studying all these kind of like deep water, why am I here things like quantum physics, like cosmology, ancient philosophy.
Well, and he mentioned as well that he had a psychedelic experience on mushrooms at which he realized that all of the bad moments in his life were him being drunk. And it took him being on mushrooms and not drunk for him to realize that pattern that was probably clear to other people became apparent to him. And he started making those life changes to get sober from the types of things that were presenting him with problems. He was literally getting his life straightened out.
Woke up today and decided to kill my ego. It never done me no good, no how. Gonna break through and blast off to the bar door. Hitting them flowers of life far away from...
About the album itself, I didn't know this until we started researching because Ray Charles has so many records, but it's a direct reference in title to 1962's Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music, which is a beautiful and moving, by Ray Charles standards even, it's a great Ray Charles record.
I do just want to point out to anyone that's unfamiliar with that record, that's a great takeaway from this that has nothing to do with Sturgill Simpson, really. That record was amazing. Not only is Ray Charles great, but I mean, just the concept of that particular time. He's blurring racial boundaries by adapting country and Western songs into his own style. Some things even go so far as to say Ray Charles helped define country and Western music by specifically putting things in that bucket and choosing to cover them and call them that for the first time. It's a great record, but it's also like a watershed moment.
I mean, that was a time when if a black artist made it, it was labeled a race record. And it got played certain places and put on certain jukeboxes. And other than that, it was country records or hillbilly records or whatever.
Yeah, and this isn't Ray Charles being a hillbilly. This is
Right.
the opposite.
Right.
Taking great country and Western songs and translating it into his style.
I can't stop loving you. I've made up my mind to live in memories of the lonesome time.
There's a lot of that sense of the outsider here. And if you read interviews with Sturgill, he references records like What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, Red-Headed Stranger by Willie Nelson, records that both of those people were told, this won't get play, this won't be successful. It's too different. So these friction points between art and commerce that you see probably more than anywhere else in the big Nashville machine. There's an undercurrent of that in this whole thing. Nashville has people literally sitting in cubicles and 4s and 5s cranking out these songs. And you can tell the difference between a song that was written by 5 people in a cubicle, good as it may be, and a song that one person wrote at the bottom of a bottle in a dark Nashville apartment by themselves.
I've been guilty of focusing too much on the Nashville pop machine, which also existed at the same time that, we're talking so much about these concentric circles. They're also present in some of the genre evolution that I think we're starting to touch on here. Sturgill is obviously very inspired by the entire concept of outlaw country, but that whole set of Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson and whatever, that whole group had an opposite in Nashville pop, right? Dolly Parton And that sort of thing was its opposite at the
Right.
time in the 70s.
Countrypolitan.
I don't think I really had an appreciation until trying to map outlaw country from Johnny Cash up through Sturgill Simpson to see that that again, there's really the symbiotic relationship between the pop portion of country and then the ever-present response to it. Our current response to it is more along the lines of that Americana movement that has Sturgill along with Jason Isbell, along with Chris Stapleton, which are all doing a similar deviation from the center. They're all using the same producer. They're literally creating the same sound. But with, Chris Staples occupying a little bit more of the traditional country angle, Sturgill operating a little bit more of the psych and blues angle, and then Jason Isbell just being a little too sad all the time. But they all sound like really similar in the sense that their production style is designed to bring out the organic nature of their songwriting, and it stands in stark opposition to Big and Rich. Dave Cobb is that person responsible for that type of sound, specifically with that group that we pointed out, Chris Stapleton, Sturgill, and Jason Isbell.
I'm still floored by the fact that this was recorded in 4 consecutive days and mixed in a day and a half for $4,000. Sturgill said they sat down and had one short conversation about it, and Dave was like, okay, got it. And then they just went in and ripped it in 4 days.
A lot of what makes Metamodern, in my opinion, easy to listen to is that it deviates from the norm just enough, but never goes way out into left field or becomes distracting with what could very easily become distracting, which is like a psychedelic influence on otherwise pretty classic Americana or songwriting music. The most clear, interesting moment in the production, I think, is It Ain't All Flowers. I mean, it threatens to become a funk song before the end of the record, basically. There's still a bonus track after that, but I mean, it swells all the way up into this incredible ending. Practically every interview I saw, someone tried to ask Sturgill what the meaning of this was. Like, why did you choose to play something backwards? And he's just describing him like Bob Ross painting a tree in like a landscape. He's like, oh, they're just happy accidents that happened in the studio. It was like the actual phrase he used in one of the interviews.
And I know this is going to look like we're destroying everything. Don't worry about it. We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
One of my favorite things I learned was just how aware Sturgill is of people not getting his simple references throughout this record. So again, going back to the first song, Turtles All the Way Down, in an NPR concert he did, he stated pretty directly, most people don't understand what the song is about. He said, it's about drugs.
I think part of what made me love this record is it came at a time and place where some of the same works that inspired this record, the content of this record, are things that I had recently been reading. And it was like, how did somebody else find this combination of stuff sort of at the same time that I did, and then process it into this and like say all the things that I'd been wanting to say about it but couldn't find the words. So this is a crazy list of things. Primarily The Spirit Molecule by Dr. Rick Strassman, which is about people's experiences on DMT, but it's really about if it's possible to achieve a higher consciousness. Pierre de Chardin's The Phenomenon of Man, Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, Emerson's essay Nature, Terence McKenna's audio lectures, the film Enter the Void, the French film, which he said basically like this culminated into a group of songs about love and the human experience centered around the light and darkness within us all. And then particularly with The Phenomenon of Man, he was interested in that because it supported this idea of a single collective human consciousness, and this idea that everything in the universe is spiritually evolving toward an end goal referred to as the omega point. Like, this dude went so far as to thank Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking in the liner notes.
And I'm guessing we both probably identified with his trajectory through these things, because listening to him recount a list of those 5 or 6 mind-blowing things all at one time, that's a lot of how me and you end up reading and talking about things anyway. It's less I want to become a student of this particular science or philosophy, and it's more I enjoy the feeling of opening my brain, putting a book in there, and having the whole thing blow up and have to start over again. It's a nice feeling. But he said, I don't pretend to be an astrophysicist or anything. Even though I do read about certain things like metaphysics and cosmology, I've always just been really interested in it. I don't pretend to be able to sit down and pontificate on any of these subjects. It's just from an esoteric stance. Like I understand where this guy is coming from, and probably it helps me to enter into his mental space that he's in when he's writing some of these songs. But to give specific examples, because this isn't just a layer that we put on top of it experiencing this record. You can see him executing on this so well. It's so shockingly easy, again, to use the first part of the first song as a great example for him comfortably exploring these ideas that are seemingly contradictory, to getting you into the song and into the idea while also contradicting what you think about it. I mean, the first line in the whole record, I've seen Jesus. Okay, let's stop there. We're in a country song, so this is comfortable and normal. I've seen Jesus. Got it. Play with flames. Hold on. Wait, that's not right. In the lake of fire. Wait, Jesus is not supposed to be in the lake of fire that I was standing in. Wait a minute. Where are we? And then in the next line, I met the devil in Seattle. Wait a minute. We were just in the lake of fire and Jesus is there. Why is the devil in Seattle?
And then he immediately goes to, and then there was this other time I met Buddha and he showed me a glowing light within. Like, what party did you get invited to?
It seems like his psychedelic experiences led to him taking things lightly, but he doesn't take his subject matter lightly that he's telling you stories about. It's really hard to describe, but that's the fact that it's hard to describe is the thing that makes us love this record, I think.
Yep.
Right? Just there are so many places where you can see him drawing out those contradictions, playing into them, being willing to cover an 80s song that sounds so totally different than the one that he made, and yet the cover he made is good. It's so good.
It's beautiful. It's poignant.
It literally brings out a part of that song that no one else could hear.
I'm sorry, but I'm just thinking of the right words to say. I know they don't sound the way you planned them to be. If you wait around a while, I'll make you fall for me. I promise.
So somebody mentioned to me, the person that shared the record with me pointed out that it's the song from the end of Napoleon Dynamite, and I had to do the, wait, what? And then go back and find that clip on YouTube, and then listen to the Sturgill song again, and then be like, wait, what? For an entire afternoon, basically. I mean, let's talk about this dude's covers, though.
Yeah, for sure.
For real. Because on this record, he has When in Rome's The Promise. He has Long White Line, the old truckin' song, that's been covered a number of times, a number of different ways. And then on the following record, A Sailor's Guide to Earth, he covers Nirvana's In Bloom. And it sounds nothing like that song. It's sort of become this dude's MO at this point, especially if you see him live, to find these soul-powered songs and to cut to the core of them and to just use them as a vehicle for sharing their main idea. They are unrecognizable. Even Long White Line doesn't sound like any of the other versions of Long White Line.
I won't be round this old town, getting more for a long, long time. Gonna hit the road, start looking for the end of that long white line.
It's the only exception to the heady subject material, heady production, because it's the most country standard type song on the record, but it blows out into this like endless highway idea. And if you've seen him live, and he mentioned it in this interview, like he said, the way we play it now, we've played it so many times, like at the end, it's borderline a hip hop song. It's funky. It's super psychedelic.
Long White Lines is awesome for a couple of reasons. One is you've made it halfway through a record that's clearly about drugs, and this song called Long White Line is not about cocaine. I feel like he had to have known that that was the case. As you said, it is a very simple song about trucking.
It's literal.
That's it.
Yeah.
But that song is awesome. There are these dual guitar parts, and the guitars seem to have different volume levels. And so you've really got to turn up into one to start hearing the lower, more background part. I really want people to be drawn into this if they're skeptical, because this is the thing that really got me over the hump, right? So we talked about from kind of beginning to end, it does a good job of getting this second wind and staying lively. But I think it's really important for him to be able to drive with those songs that are at the beginning and at the end, or then these covers kind of in the middle, so that the songs that are in between the beginning, the covers, and the end, he does a couple of these that are really simple and more like him playing a straightforward song with the acoustic. Just Let Go is littered with Buddhist references, with references that help you understand that he's not borrowing a concept just to make a cheesy song. He's not making cheap references, and he's not, as far as I can tell, he's not trying to appropriate something like Buddhist culture to make himself look smart. So he can walk into a song, by track 8 and be singing, I woke up today and decided to kill my ego.
It never done me no good, no how.
You can't start a record that way.
Right.
That would have been, solid no
On
thank
the
you.
nose, yeah.
Right. Okay, we got it. Yeah. This guy found a meditation center in Bowling Green, and now he wrote a song about it. But down to the second verse in that song, taking a 49 divine day vacation. 49 days is a reference to how long it takes the soul to complete its journey in Tibetan mythology. All of these little details sort of require the context of those stronger songs, both the psychedelic ones at the beginning and the end, and then those strong covers in the middle that really put together, I haven't really thought about it until we've talked about it, but taking a really old country song and then taking an 80s song that doesn't belong there, so kind of taking two things that already don't feel like they belong in this record at all, making them both work in totally different ways, not only shows his strength from song to song, but then again, I think shows his ability to put together a lot of concepts all at once. Somehow this whole journey through this record feels like it's long enough and short enough to get an idea of where his headspace was.
Time and time again, Lord, I've been going through the motion. It's a means to an end, it don't seem to me. Walking around, living the dream.
Living the Dream is another one that's kind of in between, again, the starters and the covers. Pretty straightforward song, but it's got these multiple readings in it. It seems like a pretty straightforward song about, being happy with yourself and your life. Ain't no point of getting out of bed if you ain't living the dream. It's like making a big old pot of coffee when you ain't got no cream. But then you get down to the next verse, and we hear, been waiting on an angel waitress to come and take my order to tell me all about the special today. I'm staring at a puddle of mud in my spoon. Couldn't be much border. Hoping the circles on the paper don't call me back, telling me to start today. Well, I guess you could read that like there's extra coffee, but it sounds a lot like heroin to me. There are these wild, comparisons that he seems to have kind of absorbed all at one time, because he was at this hinged moment between a lack of sobriety and then psychedelia and an interest in the metaphysical. And it's so interesting to hear someone be willing to be honest about their time period in between those two modes, because I think most people tend to glorify one or the other at the expense of the other.
That's the most explicit use to me of inverting the template of just a standard old country song, because the chorus of that song is that he's waiting to die. Like, that's the punchline. Life is so inherently meaningless that I might as well just get it on over with. That kind of nihilism doesn't appear anywhere else in country music. So that kind of shows you the flip side of the mindful hopefulness. There's not a lot of comfort in a vocabulary like country music with the idea that, like, we're going to die and nothing we've done here really matters that much in any discernible way that we can tell. But everybody else seems kind of afraid to say that out loud, so I'm going to do it. This is a song about meaninglessness and action to show you the meaninglessness of everything. It makes such a farce of how seriously other country songs like that take themselves.
Yeah, and in comparison to how another country song similar to that would be written, it would usually be about, I might as well drink.
Right.
He comes out of sobriety, and instead of being like, I might as well be happy. Nah, actually, it's worse. Drinking wasn't helpful. I might as well die.
But that's cool. I don't mean that in a bad way. Y'all chill.
That's probably a good way to put it. That seems to be the message. Nothing matters, but don't worry about that. We'll come back to that later. The comfortability with those apparent contradictions, the willingness to enter into someone's moment where they're in between two really big phases and appreciate the fact that they're willing to be honest and open about it is a reward in itself. You don't usually get that with artists, even the ones who claim to be super open and personable. This also stands in sharp contrast, in my opinion, to, like I've mentioned, a lot of the Americana movement and the types of artists who are occupying that space right now, and gave me a new and different appreciation for country music again. Part of appreciating country music again in this capacity means breaking apart some of the stereotypes I had laid on it. You know, like we talked about, that symbiotic relationship between Nashville pop music and outlaw country, or whatever their modern equivalents are. But I appreciate Sturgill here because he says, it's a quote, somebody told me once that it takes an Americana song 5 minutes to say what a country song says in 3, so I try to write country songs. Like, that's a pretty good encapsulation. Like, there's so much density in these songs, but they're dense because they're dense with life experience and honesty and a brain that operated as a sponge for a lot of wild ideas all at once, and somehow converted all of those thoughts and weird ideas into love for his wife, love for his kid, love for his fellow man, and love for this journey that we're all on together.
So basically, if you're ready to drop out of the simulation and get in touch with the things that you've been feeling in your heart, let Sturgill Simpson be your spirit guide.
Or take his advice and just start doing DMT. A lot of these songs are basically like, I learned a lot in a very short amount of time.
If you don't want to take the dirt road, though, start with this record, maybe. Go to tunedig.com to sign up for our emails and click the link in the email when you want to win. That's it.
I'd climb up on high top, stare out far as I can see, at the one and only home my heart has ever